A very good day to everybody in Kottayam and elsewhere. This is Gayathri from Hyderabad. I'm very happy to be on this platform. This is my debut on the web class. So if you find something not right, excuse me, or better still, just have a good laugh. You know what you shouldn't do. I'd like to thank the organizers, Dr. Shankar and his team from his department at Kottayam Medical College, who I think have been really very perseverant in making sure that this academic event happens. Unfortunately, Kottayam became the center that hit the headlines for the country when Corona arrived, literally in Kottayam. So this event was not held then. But since March, I'm sure they have really worked very hard to make this event happen, and let us all make good use of this team's effort. You would have heard the previous speakers talk to you about Dr. Joy, Dr. Feroz, talk to you about the importance of histogram and what to pick up and how to pick up abnormalities on histogram, then on the peripheral smear, what is normal and how to screen the peripheral smear for WBCs. So now in this session, what we are going to do is to look at WBC disorders, how they should be handled, what should be done. Should a marrow be done when we see WBC abnormalities on the peripheral blood? If a marrow is done, when should it be done? And when done, what should we look for? So this will be the goal of this session. Before we look at abnormalities and learn more about them, we should be very aware of what is abnormal about WBCs. There could be abnormalities we know that could relate to the number. That is, there could be leukopenia or leukocytosis. Now, what is normal leukocyte count for every age and stage of life differs, as you know now by now. And so it is very important to be aware of physiologic variations so that we do not make the mistake of calling a normal variation as an abnormal. So first fundamental thing before we study abnormalities is to know what is normal and what are the variations that one can expect. So we know that histology is the basis of good histopathology. So also here, so physiologic variations, the number as well as the distribution of WBCs varies with the age group from infancy to childhood to adult, and even in the adult, in the woman with the varying phases of the menstrual cycle. Pregnancy itself impacts WBC count as well as differential. So these variations you should be aware of. Also, you should know that there are many medications that are commonly taken which also cause some subtle changes in the WBC morphology. So every change is not really an abnormality. In terms of what are the abnormalities that one sees in the form or in the morphology under the microscope, we should be aware of the variations in the WBC morphology in fairly common conditions like viral infections or common inflammatory responses. Sometimes patients who are on certain drugs, especially marrow stimulants like the colony stimulating factors, if you are not aware that these are being taken by the patient, you could mistake WBCs on this patient as being abnormal. You could even call such a smear consistent with a leukemia. So one should be aware of these variations and these effects on the WBC. Now this is a busy slide. It is intentionally busy because what I want to convey is that there are a lot of variations. Now we are looking at agranulocytes, the lymphocytes. So If you look at this is how a normal one small field would look. If you take this as one field for as a representative field, you see that there is one cell here. This is at a very low magnification. This is at an even lower magnification. This is 10x here. And in these many cells, which are all WBCs, which are all agranulocytes, there is a variation which is quite significant. So the importance of screening a smear on low magnification is that it gives you an idea that there are variations. So when you know that there are variations, you would take care to focus on some areas where you suspect there could be abnormal forms. So that's the importance. So one should go from a low magnification to a higher one. This is a normal lymphocyte here. A normal lymphocyte which shows a pycnotic nucleus, very, very scant cytoplasm. One should look at this cell very carefully, try to get familiar with it, with its size. For ease and for understanding, you can compare it to the normocytic RBCs in the background. So it will be slightly larger than the normocytic red cell in the given field. So that's how you can familiarize your eyes with what is normal. And all the other cells here that you see are all variations. This one, you can make out that this is much larger than the normal, so much more cytoplasm. This again more cytoplasm, the nucleus is a bit larger. There is even a vacuole in this. Here again a large lymphoid cell. You compare it to the normal, see how much larger it is. But this is a stimulated lymphocyte. These are all stimulated lymphocytes. This 1, 2, 3, and then the one here. A very, very easily detectable stimulated lymphocyte or a virocyte or a transformed lymphocyte. You see the normal lymphocyte sitting next to it. That, for comparison, that's how the normal lymphocyte is. And this is how the lymphocyte would look if it is stimulated by some kind of an immune mechanism. So being familiar with these is very important. And then what you see, the other agranulocyte in the peripheral smear, which is the monocyte. These two are images of typical monocyte. This one shows vacuoles in the cytoplasm. This one shows you the lobulated nucleus of a monocyte. Now, what you must know is that all these are within the normal. So being familiar with the normal variations in morphology helps you to not make erroneous diagnosis of very, ominous conditions like acute leukemia. On the other hand, see this cell. It's standing alone, but you can make out that it definitely is not normal. Why? Because one, it lacks cytoplasm. And look at the nucleus. The nucleus is very large. It is open. There is even a slightly indistinct, but a nucleolus is seen. So this is a blast. So you look at this transformed lymphocyte from the previous image and look at this. The nuclear characteristics are very different. So even if there is no cell for comparison, you can make out that this cell is a blast. Whether it is a lymphoblast, myeloid blast is not your concern now. You identify a cell as a blast, and that is important. When will you be required to suspect or pick up or recognize a blast? Sometimes it is unsuspected. You get a smear in a routine tray, and you must not miss these cells. There are other cells here, normal lymphocyte here, normal lymphocyte here. These other 3 cells here are all blasts. So you must, such a smear can be there in an unsuspecting case. You're just looking at a routine tray, and then you should not miss these. And maybe it is a case with a clinical suspicion of acute leukemia, and then you would need to pick up these blasts. At low magnification itself, you should suspect that this particular slide, this particular case requires your attention to pick up these blasts. So screening, low magnification, graded, start with 10x, look at the range of WBC's variation, then identify the areas which could be suspicious, focus on them, and then you will pick up the abnormal cells. So this is a blast again. So what I will try to do now is to show you several images of varying blasts, different blasts, how they could. The thing about blasts is that it's not as if they come with one particular description or one standard appearance. All these are blasts. What type of blasts we need to identify. Sometimes we can identify whether they are lymphoid or myeloid, and we will look at those images. This is a blast. All these three cells are blasts. Is this a lymphoblast? Is this a myeloblast? I can't tell. But I'm sure that these are blasts, and that is good enough. You know that these are abnormal. These many cells in one field, definitely not a normal variation. You look at these. Now, this one is in the peripheral smear. This one is also in the peripheral smear. And this one is a marrow imprint showing you very, very classical L3 type of blast. The FAB L3 type or the Burkitt type of blast with multiple punched out vacuoles in a blue cytoplasm. And these vacuoles are so many that sometimes they mask the nucleus. They appear as if they are even within the nucleus, like in this cell. So neat punched out vacuoles. So these are also blasts. This is a blast. These are blasts. These are also blasts. So see how many variations we are able to see within the term called blast. These are blasts. Of the 4 cells in this, all of them are blasts, and each of them is unique in its own way. Look at the number of numerous cells. Almost all of them are blasts, and each one of them is standing out with a feature that is slightly different from its neighbor. So also here, so many blasts, and yet not all of them look the same. It is as if this blast is unique to this case, this population is unique to this case, and this to its own case. Again, another type of so almost grotesque looking cells here. Many, many features overlapping with each other, but a combination of several abnormalities in the cytoplasm, blue cytoplasm, few nuclei, few vacuoles, but not like in that L3 that we saw. Very large nucleus, lobulated, here very distinctly lobulated, but also round nucleus. So there is variation in size, variation in morphology. This variability in blast morphology is something that every time you identify an acute leukemia, you should just spend a few minutes after you know that you picked up an acute leukemia, screen the slides a lot to notice the variations within these blast population, and you will come across so many variations within the one single slide. This will help you to increase the number of visual catalogs, the images in your library, in your visual library, and that is how you become a smart pathologist. There's no, you don't need much to pick up when there are so many blasts. I focus them for you, three cells here. Anyone can say that there's a blast. But a smart pathologist will pick up these cells even when they are few, and therefore detect more such abnormal cells in that smear, and hence pick up an abnormal WBC morphology, a leukemia. Another blast, you all know that granules in the cytoplasm, prominent distinct nucleoli in the nucleus, coarse granules. Probably this is a myeloid blast. I won't bet my last penny on this, but yes, it almost certainly will be a myeloperoxidase positive myeloid blast. When I see these, Unless I do a myeloperoxidase stain, I will not tell morphologically whether these are lymphoid blasts, lymphoma cells, or myeloid blasts. Here, you see beautiful ore rods stained with myeloperoxidase. So when we see ore rods, we are sure that we are dealing with myeloid blasts. But when there are no distinct features like that, it is safe to just call them blasts and not name them as 80%, 30% lymphoblasts, so many percent myeloblasts. If you do not see ore rods, don't call them by any name, just call them blasts. But this is very distinctive. You cannot miss this. This is a textbook picture. If you come across an APML, you will never miss this. Once you've spotted them, you won't miss them ever. What if such distinct ore rods, multiple ore rods are not seen? Can we still pick up APML? Yes, for sure. Look at the way to learn again. There is a tip here. You know that this will turn out to be an APML because of this multiple ore rod spaghetti cell. Okay. Now you look at the other cells. These are abnormal promyelocytes. This is how promyelocytes will look in a classical case of APML. Not always will you get a cell like this. These are enough. These are good enough for you to suspect that this is APML. So what will you do? You must immediately do a myeloperoxidase, and you will see that almost every cell, every single cell is showing intense myeloperoxidase positivity. So morphologically, this abnormal population of WBCs can be identified as APML. Of course, the clinician will want PML-RARA confirmation later, but once you pick up these, you must immediately call up the physician, because this is one hematologic neoplastic emergency that the physician would like to be warned about. He will initiate appropriate pre-treatment protocol for managing APML right away. Another population of blasts, you would know that these highly lobulated nuclei with prominent nucleoli here, these are typical of, you would have already come to a conclusion in your mind. These are monocytoid blasts. Okay, but here, what do you see here? You see lobulations like in this textbook case. I put a textbook case just so you can compare it. Look at these lobulations. They look quite like these, but there is something distinctive. These bilobed, buttock-shaped nuclei. Now, these nuclei are the giveaway. Although there are these lobulated nuclei, these bilobed or buttock-shaped nuclei with cytoplasmic granules, this one even has ore rods, multiple granules in the cytoplasm. This is the wider range of morphology in abnormal promyelocytes of APML. So you can confirm this by again doing a myeloperoxidase and showing that these lobulated nuclei, these cells, are actually peroxidase positive. They are not monocytoid. So this is a variation of APML that you should not miss. Now, what we saw are classical pictures from day-to-day cases that come to my lab, marrow pictures mostly, a few peripheral smears, so that you understand that what you see in the peripheral smear is what you will expect in the marrow. So when you do a bone marrow aspiration, you must make adequate number of smears so that you do protein staining, your Romanovsky stains, and keeps air-dried smears without adding it in any preservative to do cytochemical stains. So your cytochemical stains, whether you do all of them or not, myeloperoxidase is a must. In your lab, whether you do cytology, histopathology, or hematopathology, you should have a myeloperoxidase, because that can help you pick up, sift the myeloid from the, definitely identify the myeloid leukemias. So myeloperoxidase stain, esterase is of course preferable and should be done. Okay. So that was for the cytologic morphology of abnormal cells. I've dealt mostly with cells that look akin to agranulocytes, blasts. Okay. So in this case, now there is a leukopenia. In addition, there is thrombocytopenia, and therefore a bone marrow aspiration and biopsy are done. Aspiration not productive. Biopsy, very small foci. In fact, probably the only focus of cells here, but a sea of monomorphic cells uninterrupted by megakaryocytes in this focus. So you suspect acute leukemia. Will you diagnose acute leukemia just on the basis of this? I wouldn't suggest that you should do that. You must look at the morphology of the marrow aspirate. Since it was not productive, look at the peripheral blood, look for blasts if you have, in case you have missed them. And maybe you will be lucky and pick them up, and that can help you. This marrow in all other areas was like this, extensive marrow necrosis. So we had to take the help of these foci of viable cells and do immunohistochemistry. And sure enough, CD34 positivity establishes that these monomorphic population of cells is actually representative of blasts or acute leukemia. Okay, we'll go to another interesting clinical scenario. So, being familiar with the clinical background, being familiar with the peripheral blood morphology and counts, especially the morphology, is very, very vital before you look at the bone marrow aspiration, bone marrow imprint, biopsy imprint cytology, and the bone marrow section itself. So look at the story. We'll look at this child's history. A 6-year-old child was evaluated for pancytopenia and was diagnosed to have severe aplastic anemia on the basis of marrow aspiration, which doesn't show any myeloid precursors nor megakaryocytes, very few normoblasts, and a biopsy code that shows cellularity that is quite dismal for a 6-year-old. Okay, so this child has been diagnosed with marrow hypoplasia, and when you look at the child, there is one finding that has been highlighted for you here, and that is the key to an underlying syndrome. And what is that? That is polydactyly. Okay, if you've seen the extra thumb, the Hrithik Roshan sign, you see that. So that is a sign that there is an underlying syndrome. So once this diagnosis is made, this child remains on close follow-up, not only because this child will require transfusions frequently, which he did. He was transfusion dependent, and during the follow-up, we would insist on looking at the counts and looking at the smear. And at the age of 12, he presented for transfusion again with a WBC count that had risen to normal range. Now an aplasia with about 700 to 800 WBC count, severe leukopenia, suddenly showing up WBC count of 8,400, definitely an ominous sign. Peripheral smear showed those abnormal cells. Actually, one of the slides that you had seen earlier. Marrow aspiration was done because in a Fanconi anemia, one is not very surprised to see that it transforms to acute leukemia. Sure enough, we picked up numerous blasts here in the aspiration and in the biopsy imprints. There are normoblasts in the background, very few maturing myeloid cells, and these blasts, frequent blasts. Okay, so the criteria for acute leukemia are fulfilled by the number of blasts in the marrow cytology. So this is an acute leukemia. You saw the trephine section earlier at diagnosis of aplasia, and look at the cellularity now. He just seems to have grown cells, and sure he has, but they are not normal. They are abnormal WBC. This is the higher magnification HLE stain of the trephine biopsy code. You must remember that these are cells monomorphic again with large vesicular nuclei. Describing shape of cells in the marrow makes no sense. All the cells in the marrow are round. So these large cells with vesicular nuclei, monomorphic, they are blasts. Yes. But these blasts, if you have not looked at the cytology, you can mistake megaloblasts for these blasts. So you should be very careful. When you report on trephined sections, get familiar with reporting on the, looking at the marrow cytology. Very, very important. So we saw some examples of leukopenia and variations and what all are these cells can look like. We look at the other extreme, which is leukocytosis. When you see leukocytosis, you should be curious as to what constitutes this leukocytosis. What are the cells that make up this large number of WBCs in the peripheral blood? So a low magnification, a 10x here, showing you, indicating to you that there is a variety of cells here again. See, the different types of cells that you can, forms of cells that you can see at low magnification. You go to a higher magnification, you identify each of these cells as belonging to a particular stage of maturation in the myeloid series. And then you, since if you look at this magnification, you get a chance to look at a larger number of cells in a field, and so you pick up this prominent blasts. See, while there is a variety of myeloid maturation cells, there is a prominence of blasts. So this again is a very vital point to note. Here you see leukocytosis, lot of neutrophils, myelocytes. Okay. So important to know what are the various types of myeloid cells or granulocytes that are seen in the accompanying as part of this leukocytosis. Never miss looking at the accompanying cells. When there is so much leukocytosis, is there also accompanying change in the red cells? Whether there is leukopenia or whether there is leukocytosis, if you see so many teardrop cells, occasional nucleated RBCs too, so many red cell, so much of variation in red cell morphology, you should suspect that there is something more going on in the stroma, in the marrow stroma, and that would be myelofibrosis. So teardrop cells must ring a bell to suspect myelofibrosis. Here is an example where in addition to leukocytosis, there is marked eosinophilia. And with that, look at the platelets, they are large, very large, giant platelets, large in number, large in size. There is a blast. Is this a myeloid blast, lymphoid blast? Could this be megakaryocytic blast? Possible. Okay, so you should keep, when you look at WBCs, especially in leukocytosis, look at what the accompanying cells are. What do they look like? Do they show any changes? And they can give you a very important clue to an underlying marrow pathology. We look at some marrow pictures of cases with leukocytosis here. Okay, so if you do a marrow aspiration in a case like one of the cases that we saw in the previous frames, you can expect to see a very densely particulated marrow to the point that it will be difficult to smear the particles. They will be very heavy and they don't dry easily, they don't fix easily, they don't stain very well. That's because they are so dense in cellularity. So such dense cellular trails of marrow particles with very large number of megakaryocytes. And this is how, even though this is a very large cell, this is how a normal megakaryocyte is expected to look. I just kept one image. It's not possible to show large, so many megakaryocytes which are normal. They really are very variable in morphology. But we will see a large number of abnormal megakaryocytes here. Okay? So this is how a normal megakaryocyte would look. And look at these They are varying in size again here. And now in the trephine biopsy section, you look at what you look for. You look for the distribution of megakaryocytes in this marrow. One, you look for whether they are distributed megakaryocytes, whether they are distributed uniformly, as in this case, uniformly in the interstitium, fairly evenly spaced, or whether they are crowded like in this, like here. More than 4 or 5 megakaryocytes in a cluster, we call them crowding. They are crowded. See the number of megakaryocytes, and in fact, this chain of megakaryocytes, they seem to be inside a sinusoid. There is megakaryocytic crowding. There is marked variation in their morphology. You see some small megakaryocytes. We'll look at more later. At an even higher magnification, you see that there is a small megakaryocyte, a dwarf megakaryocyte. Then there are these large megakaryocytes, very large, but they do not have the accompanying cytoplasm to the extent that the nuclei are. Like, see, this is lobulated, but it has nice mature cytoplasm, faintly staining, candy floss-like cytoplasm. These megakaryocytes, they almost look like giant cells, metastatic giant cells. If you are fond of histopathology, they look like that. Some more ways in which you will find megakaryocytes, abnormalities in megakaryocyte distribution. Look at the cluster. This is deliberately a low magnification kept for you to show you some important features that accompany megakaryocytic abnormalities. One is their distribution. They are away from the trabeculae as well as near the trabeculae, and they are crowded. They are distributed right across between trabeculae, and this marrow is showing hardly anything else other than the cellularity and some extent of streaming. So you will expect that this is an abnormality in which, disease in which megakaryocytic abnormalities are an integral part. Look at these are distributed more evenly, whereas here they are distributed in clusters and right across, no fat spaces at all in this trephine section. Here you see a higher magnification to show you that these megakaryocytes nuclei are almost pleomorphic. There are dwarf megakaryocytes, also mummified megakaryocytes. These are some abnormal forms of megakaryocytes. This is a dwarf megakaryocyte. This one is a dark dwarf megakaryocyte. And then in this case, you see that these megakaryocytes are trapped in collagen. Between strands of collagen, these megakaryocytes, abnormal, small, dwarf megakaryocytes, are trapped. So all these are megakaryocytic abnormalities. A very simple abnormality in the neutrophil that you should never miss. Just like I said about APML among the leukemias, this abnormality in neutrophils, these hyper-segmented neutrophils. More than 3 nuclei consistently seen. See how many lobules are there. So these hyper-segmented neutrophils are a very, must never be missed. Never ever be missed, because this is like magic. This is one of the situations where you can play the hero, immediately give a diagnosis, suspect a diagnosis that is very easily treatable, and the patient will go dancing home and you can go singing home. See, accompanying these, what are they? There are macrocytes. Macrocytes. Take the help of the histogram. Even a 3-part differential here will tell you that there is macrocytosis accompanying this histogram. There are hypersegmented neutrophils, a fantastic combination to suspect megaloblastic anemia. And what would you find if you did a marrow? Would you do a marrow in this case? You would, if you think your lab cannot support with folate B12 assays, or if that is going to take time, you could do a marrow aspiration, and this is what you would find. erythroid prominence. All the dark nuclei here are all the erythroid cells. And look at them, what are they? They are all megaloblasts. Okay, large number of megaloblasts. So megaloblastic anemia, and this is how the defined section looks. I showed you an acute leukemia in that case of Fanconi, acute leukemia transformation, where these cells are occupying a large portion of the marrow. Similar cells here, but these are megaloblasts. Therefore, being familiar with the marrow cytology is very important in the reading of marrow of marrow biopsy sections. You shouldn't do it alone. You should look at it along with biopsy imprint cytology, aspiration cytology, as a unit together. Now we look at some very fascinating entities, which if you do not suspect, you will not pick up. Those blasts, those myelocytic peak, those basophils, eosinophils, they will all stand out and you will pick them up. But you should increase your acumen to identify subtle abnormalities. Just look at the variations in these granulocytes. Okay? You can describe them in your own words, and you will find that you will fall short of words. There are so many variations in morphology. These two could be monocytes. This one could be a monocyte. This one could be a granulocyte. We don't know. In fact, is this a metamyelocyte? Is this a myelocyte? What is it? Is it a granulocyte at all? What is this? Is this a monocyte? Is this a binucleate cell? What is it? Are these? So when you actually, once you find it difficult to identify consequently several granulocytic cells, you must brighten your vision to identify more abnormalities, and then you will be rewarded with something that could be fairly diagnostic, like this ring-shaped nucleus in a neutrophil. All these are variations in neutrophilic nuclear morphology and also granules. Now, the granules depends on how good or what the pH of your Romanovsky stain is. Do you do Leishman? Do you do Giemsa? How brightly do the granules stain in the cytoplasm, in the stain in your routine lab? Depending on that, you could read them as abnormal granulations. Should become familiar with that. Now look at this abnormality. I'll start with this. This is, of course, a very classical cell, spectacle-shaped cell with two nuclei that are nicely separated with a link between them and bright red granules, a nice, beautiful eosinophil. What would you call this? This is bilobed. It is not really a spectacle, but it could still be, little variation is allowed. After all, nature has some amount of variation. But the granules are not red, they are not eosinophil. So perhaps this is not an eosinophil. What about this one? This has spectacle-shaped nuclei, two distinct lobules, but no cytoplasmic granules. So these are variations that you should pick up. This one, if you see more of these in the smear, you will know that this is an anomaly in the in the neutrophil, which is called the Pelger-Huyd anomaly. Some more subtle changes, and here, if you are comfortable with identifying and recognizing neutrophilic nuclear abnormalities, you will look and screen for more abnormalities, and that's how you'll pick up. As you screen to look for more nuclear abnormalities, you may come across, these kind of abnormalities. Definitely not a normal nucleus in a mature neutrophil. But accompanying these, there are some telltale signs. Don't miss them. Look at these cells here. Amidst RBCs, these two, are platelets. These have the same staining property. They are the size of the red cells almost, and one of them has spikes, but the other the smooth contours. These are giant platelets. And look at this cell. Is this a lymphocyte? Is it a monocyte? Again, an atypical agranulocyte. So you have a beautiful combination in this one field that gives you a diagnosis. You should not miss it. And this one definitely requires marrow aspiration and marrow biopsy to identify these dyspoietic granulocytes and, in this case, prominent blasts, thus giving you a diagnosis that is classic morphologic entity. Often MDS is picked up because of typical morphologic variations. You see every granulocyte in this field, in the marrow, every granulocyte could be called dyspoietic. This one has granules, but the nucleus is abnormal. This one is so large, no granules. The nucleus is lobulated, but there is no accompanying cytoplasmic maturation. Again, the same, no cytoplasmic maturation in the form of cytoplasmic granules. The nucleus is got lobulated. It is maturing, but the cytoplasm is not. Same here. Nucleus is lobulated, not the classical 3 lobules, irregular, and cytoplasm lacks granules. This one is a blast. This one is probably a blast. This erythroid precursors, they are again showing features of dyspoiesis, nuclear budding, fragmentation, and so on. So we identified dysmyelopoiesis and dyserythropoiesis and blast prominence. And what do we see here in another frame of the same case? A megakaryocyte that's totally abnormal. So dysmyelopoiesis, dyserythropoiesis, dysmegakaryopoiesis. Classical triad for myelodysplastic syndrome. Of course, you would do the other ancillary studies to establish MDS, but definitely a morphologic entity that should be identified. So when you do a marrow aspiration, for whatever reason, whether it is for leukopenia, leukocytosis, for anemia, for thrombocytopenia, for thrombocytosis, for whatever reason, you must always have these many for cytologic evaluation. A peripheral smear, a marrow aspirate smear stained with Romanowski, marrow biopsy imprint with distinct core imprints, again for cytologic evaluation, and marrow aspirate for pearl staining. So this should be the minimum cytologic evaluation for when you do a marrow examination. And the trephine biopsy core should contain at least 1.5 centimeters of medullary marrow. 1.5 centimeters, half of which is cartilage, is not really adequate, especially when you pick up diagnosis like aplastic anemia. Marrow can be patchily cellular, so you can find foci with this kind of hypocellularity. And so unless it is an adequate core, which should be at least 1.5 centimeters of medulla, ignoring the subcortical marrow, unless that is available, you cannot authentically diagnose an hypoplastic marrow. Okay, at this stage, maybe you want to just shut your eyes for 2 seconds, and you may be screen weary, or maybe ear weary, I don't know. We'll move on now. Okay, sometimes a WBC abnormality gets identified because of an abnormality in another cell line. This, very typical, very classical. I don't need to even mention, but look at this. At the nice, beautifully agglutinated red cells in the peripheral smear. When you see this much agglutination and there is a leukopenia, obviously you will do a marrow and you will be rewarded with a morphologically distinct entity here, right? So many plasma cells, well differentiated. But when you see these many plasma cells, whether you see these many or not, you must do a differentiate, because plasma cell count is important in the evaluation of marrow plasmacytosis. To differentiate reactive plasmacytosis from clonal neoplastic proliferation of plasma cells, one of the important criteria is the number of plasma cells in the marrow. So if they are not as many as in this case, if there are fewer, say maybe 2 in this field, or maybe 3 or 4 in this field. Unless you count 500, or sometimes it may be necessary to count 1,000 cells, do a myelogram, which includes 1,000 nucleated cells, you may not really get a good idea of the number of plasma cells in that marrow. So the marrow aspiration or the marrow cytology smear is very vital. It tells you the morphology, it gives you the number very clearly. You can train your eyes to also count plasma cells and blasts also in the trephine core. You must have access to good sections, well cut and well stained, and then you can identify the individual plasma cells and count them. But I would rely more on well stained cytology. So if there is leukocytosis or there is leukopenia, if there is red cell abnormality, you would look at the marrow and be rewarded with something that could be diagnostic. There can be leukocytosis with lymphocytosis, right? We know that. In this situation, what is extremely valuable is the clinical background. Is this relative lymphocytosis? Is this absolute lymphocytosis? Is important to know. Is this a child? Is this a 2-year-old? Is it a 70-year-old? Depending on that, you will even interpret the lymphocytes differently. Is there organomegaly? Is there lymphadenopathy? Was there a preceding illness? Was there a viral febrile illness? Is there a seasonal viral infection going on in the community? All these can help you to more intelligently or smartly interpret the lymphocytosis in a given case. Is there a systemic illness, especially an autoimmune disease? Are there any red cell and platelet abnormalities? All these will help you interpret the lymphocyte morphology and how I show you. If I showed you this smear and told you that this is a 70-year-old, you would suspect that this could be a lymphoproliferative disorder. If I told you that this belongs to a 2-year-old and there is thrombocytopenia, it is likely that these could be interpreted as blasts. We've seen this smear earlier. Look at this, the same history. If I told you that this is from, again, a pediatric age group and there is lymphocytosis with leukocytosis, maybe this is reactive lymphocytosis. But if this is a 70-year-old, 60-year-old with this degree of lymphocytosis, you will evaluate for chronic lymphoproliferative disorder. What would you do? You would, of course, do a bone marrow aspiration and biopsy. In all lymphoproliferative disorders, aspiration has a purpose, biopsy has another purpose. Aspiration is useful because you want to see if there are accompanying abnormalities. But often, what you see in the peripheral smear is what is there in the marrow. There is lymphocytosis in the peripheral smear. There is lymphocytosis in the marrow. It doesn't tell you anything further. We know that for all lymphoid proliferations, establishing clonality is vital. So to establish clonality, marrow cytology alone is not sufficient. Peripheral blood can help you establish clonality by doing a flow cytometry. If you do a trephine section, you will establish clonality and also get a chance to look at the distribution of these lymphoid cells. If the lymphoid proliferation is like this, well-defined nodule right in the interstitium, you don't know whether these are neoplastic or reactive. So if you do not do immunohistochemistry to establish the nature of this lymphoid proliferation, you may not be able to tell whether this is a reactive, normal variation or a clone, a single clone of abnormal lymphoid cells. If they are located like this in the paratrabecular region in sheets, you're almost certain that this is a chronic lymphoproliferative disorder. Still, you need to establish the clonality by doing immunohistochemistry because you need to confirm that these are clonal. Second, knowing whether they are T or B makes a huge difference in management. So also here, a nodule, but it is paratrabecular. Only IHC will prove the nature of these lymphoid proliferations. So identifying a lymphoid population by doing IHC is vital. This one, there is a nodule. I can't tell whether this is reactive or whether this is part of a lymphoproliferative disorder. So also this. This is a higher magnification of this. It doesn't tell me more than that there are lymphoid proliferation. That I could make out on aspiration cytology, on biopsy also. But unless I do immunohistochemistry and prove whether these are monoclonal or polyclonal, I cannot interpret this marrow correctly. Here is a classical case. I don't know how many of you would have seen a classical case of hairy cell leukemia. The trephine section looks like this, a fried egg appearance, that is, the nuclei of the cells are separated by spaces in between, and this is how a hairy cell will look. Maybe, one way to learn to pick up hairy cells is you pick up a case of a hairy cell leukemia identified on trephine biopsy, and then go look at the smear, and then you will pick up these hairy cells. More examples of why trephine biopsy should be done. Here, cervical lymphadenopathy, weight loss, fever, ill-formed granuloma seen on H&E, stains done to prove. I'm sure you've made your diagnosis. This is CD30. So this panel of immunohistochemical stains helps identify marrow involvement in a lymphoid proliferation, that is Hodgkin lymphoma. Some cell populations can mimic lymphoid cells in the marrow. Okay, where in the peripheral blood we saw variations in lymphoid morphology. In the marrow also, since everything in the marrow, I said, is round, there can be cells in the marrow which are non-native but will mingle with the rest of the round cells that are native to the marrow. So, especially in a child, when you see these clusters of monomorphic cells, which on low magnification could be considered as lymphocytes, see, you could think that these are lymphocytes, but they have a tendency to cling to each other, to come together and stay together. They are so close together actually that there is nuclear molding. So when you see clusters like this, if you are lucky to find them on an marrow aspirate smear, or maybe better in an biopsy imprint smear, you should you should think about whether these are lymphocytes or non-native cells, non-lymphoid cells, which is metastatic round cells. So since metastatic round cell tumors can be missed on because of their morphology, aspiration alone will not be sufficient. Also, all metastatic lesions require biopsy, because otherwise focally distributed lesions will not get picked up by aspiration alone. And this is how this case would look. This focus that is circled here of metastatic round cells, see, so they show a slight tendency to spindling, unlike lymphocytes. So that's how we differentiate them from lymphoid cells in the marrow histology. That was a round cell tumor in a neuroblastoma in a child. You would do the appropriate immunohistochemical stains to establish the nature of those round cells, and then only sign out the report as metastatic neuroblastoma or metastatic Ewing's, whichever it may be. Having access to immunohistochemistry, therefore, is absolutely essential. So we'll now look at some situations and ask ourselves when marrow study has added value to the evaluation of the case, and ask ourselves whether marrow study has actually added to anything to the evaluation of a particular WBC abnormality. When there are definite findings, or findings that are definite in your mind on the peripheral smear, and you do a marrow aspiration and site biopsy, you must do an imprint cytology, which could be productive in terms of diagnosis. And so this is a complete entity in itself. There can be situations where there are definite findings on the peripheral smear. The marrow aspiration and biopsy are either non-diagnostic or not productive. It is a dry tab and the imprints have not yielded enough cellular foci for you to come to a conclusion. Then you must depend on the biopsy histology, on this section, and plan to do additional stains on them. There definitely is value addition by doing marrow studies, because in the first class, in both these situations, because morphologic diagnosis can find a label to the entity, and sometimes it may not do that, but it will tell you what else to do. Like if there is fibrosis, you know what you should look for. If there is necrosis, we've seen those examples. Whatever there is, it will tell you what next to do, to identify, to confirm, or to classify the disorder. When does marrow study add little value? And when that happens, these are the usual situations where marrow study may not really add value to the diagnostic armamentarium. When a child comes suffering from a viral infection and you see large number of abnormal lymphoid cells, you do a marrow aspiration, what you will find is more of those same cells. So that may not really help. So the timing of marrow evaluation will be important in such a situation. You may want to look at the clinical history in detail, look for whether there is significant splenomegaly, whether there is lymphadenopathy, are there any petechiae. Use all these also before you do a marrow in a child, especially a child with an ongoing suspected viral infection. So a lot of corroborative history situations will be useful here. Like I showed you these examples, or in all these examples, when there is abnormality that is inconclusive in the peripheral blood, marrow morphology is also not likely to establish diagnosis. You should be aware of it because this is an invasive procedure. Before the needle is put, marrow aspiration or biopsy needle is put inside the patient, you must ask yourself what you expect to find in the marrow morphology that can help you add diagnostic information or prognostic information. Before doing that, don't put a needle. Ask yourself these questions. So be very clever. Take all the available history. Take help from everything, every bit of information that comes with the patient. That is the patient's history, clinical examination, the additional investigations, biochemical evaluations, radiologic evaluations, and so on, before you do an invasive procedure, which is a marrow evaluation. Sometimes these agents, chemotherapeutic agents, and even sometimes a single dose of steroids can alter the morphology of the marrow, cause a lot of myelosuppression, myelonecrosis, so that at the end of a difficult or painful procedure, you end up with no real answers to the underlying disease. Now look at the scenario, cytopenias in a 7-year-old child with fever of 10 days duration, and marrow, because of cytopenias and fever, marrow aspiration is done. Here is a picture to show you how emperipoiesis looks in a megakaryocyte. Now you compare these images with this, and you will know that what you're seeing here in these 3 images is very abundant, avid phagocytosis in these macrophages. Such a hungry, greedy macrophage, such a greedy macrophage. See that? So many cells it has taken neutrophils, it has taken platelets, it has taken lymphocytes, neutrophils, everything inside it. So pregnant with all this material. So this is a classic hemophagocytosis. So has marrow study contributed to the diagnosis? Absolutely. Even before all the other criteria, biochemical parameters like prothrombin time, fibrinogen, ferritin, LDH, all these cholesterol, triglycerides, all these values arrive from the biochemistry laboratory, you can give a diagnosis that can be life-saving for this child. Hemophagocytosis. HLH or histiocytic lymphophagocytic hemophagocytosis is a clinical emergency in a child, and the child requires to be put on a definite treatment protocol and can be saved or lost. So marrow definitely added value in that situation. Another situation here, 2-year-old, another child here with cytopenias, also part of pancytopenia. And the marrow aspiration was not very productive, but towards the trails of these few particles, we saw cells that seemed empty. So these are cells that, unless I focus, I suspect these little things that if I ignore these nuclei on low magnification and miss that each one of them is showing a certain kind of pattern of negative staining, these round emptiness around these nuclei. These are all cells which on sections are classical. So these storage cells. Now you go back and look at these. Each one of them is a Gaucher cell. Trapine sections in 2 cases of Gauchers. Should be a bit aware to pick up these empty looking cells on marrow cytology. Should look at low magnification as well as higher magnification. Let us see if marrow evaluation has contributed in this case. A young woman with fever of 10 days duration. Peripheral smear has shown these blasts. No doubt at all. These are very definite blasts. We have seen these blasts earlier too. And definitely these are blasts. It's an acute leukemia. Marrow aspiration attempted. No, not productive. Imprint smears. No cells to be stained with for any cytochemical stain. So we had to fall back on the peripheral blood. We were planning to do flow cytometry too on the marrow aspirate, but there was no material. Why was there no? Do you think this marrow has helped? Probably not. What was more productive in this case is the peripheral blood. Extensive, massive myelonecrosis, no viable foci of cells, therefore no productive cells to do immunophenotyping either on the biopsy or on the aspirate by flow cytometry. Neither IHC nor flow cytometry could help. What helped is the presence of these blasts in this case. So in this situation, marrow has not really added value. But will you not do? You will attempt. To know that there is massive myelonecrosis, you would need to do a trapine. And why should you know? Because this patient's response, this behavior to chemotherapy is not expected to be as good as in the case with no myelonecrosis. Look at this case now. Has marrow study contributed to the diagnosis? Let's see. Cell here, this is a blast, but this has some funny things projecting out. Blebs. These are called blebs, projections from the cytoplasm, and abnormal platelets in the background, and negative or a dry tab, and you see a classical textbook case here of megakaryoblastic leukemia, and this is from another case of ours in which you see cells which also almost look like metastatic carcinoma cells. These are megakaryoblast. Okay? So the rare entity of M7 requires not only peripheral smear but also marrow evaluation for establishing diagnosis. A 55-year-old man with leukopenia, anemia, has marrow study contributed to the diagnosis? Of course it has. There weren't any cells that could help establish a diagnosis. Leukopenia, anemia required marrow. And why is all this anemia there? There is normal marrow here. But in this part of the core, non-native cells in islands, cytokeratin positive, So adenocarcinoma metastatic to marrow. Has it helped? Of course it has helped. Look at this case. Has marrow study contributed in the evaluation of this case with leukocytosis, occasional basophil, thrombocytosis, marked thrombocytosis? The differentiate, most of the cells are neutrophilic series. There is no myelocyte peak. There are no blasts. So in such a case, earlier we used to do what is called leukocyte alkaline phosphatase or neutrophil alkaline phosphatase and differentiate leukemoid reaction from CML. Now, of course, we have specific tools, but when these were the historically important stains that were used earlier before we had access to molecular staining. So finally, when we do a marrow study, what all should we plan for? Anytime, when do you looked at several instances to answer the question, when you would do a bone marrow evaluation, what you would expect to find in a marrow evaluation. So when you are doing a marrow evaluation, what should you be prepared for? You should collect marrow aspirate in EDTA as well as in sodium heparin. Collect marrow aspirate so that you can go back and make extra smears from the EDTA sample in the marrow in a cooler laboratory setting. Make sure that you have enough unstained smears to do routine pearls. Keep enough to do cytochemical stains. Keep enough aspirate in EDTA to be able to do flow cytometry to establish immunophenotypic profile if that is needed. Ensure that you collect marrow aspiration always in sodium heparin to do routine karyotyping. The value of karyotyping in marrow evaluation cannot be overemphasized, and you should never ever want to go back to do a marrow aspiration so that you can do karyotyping just because you found something that was a surprise to you. It is better that you collect the marrow in sodium heparin at the first instance when you do the marrow evaluation so that in case karyotyping is indicated, you can submit it to the molecular lab. So also for fission PCR. When you do accompanying marrow profiling biopsy, ensure that you take adequate imprints for the same reason as this. Sometimes your marrow aspiration is dry and your imprints will come to your rescue in establishing diagnosis. Ensure that your sections can be stained for all these cytochemical stains plus for immunohistochemical stains, as we've seen so many examples. Ultimately, I will conclude with this one slide, a saying from, this is one of my favorite quotes from Winthrop's textbook of hematology. None other than Maxwell Winthrop has said that the peripheral smear examination probably contributes more to the diagnosis of hematologic disorders than any other single laboratory parameter. So, when you're good at peripheral smear examination, you will automatically become good at marrow evaluation, both morphology and ancillary stain investigations. You will know their importance. So start with good peripheral smear examination and it will take you very far. Thank you for the very patient listening, and I hope you could keep your eyes open because I try to share a lot of images. I know you've been watching the screen constantly, but I hope it has been a productive screen time for all of you. I have myself enjoyed talking to you, although I really miss seeing your eyes, seeing your presence in front of me, understanding whether I am making sense or not, asking you questions. I miss that most. Asking you whether you can identify what I am showing. I hope you've found this a good learning experience. I have learned how to record for a webinar, how to conduct an online class. Thank you. Thank you, Beacon. Thank you, the organizing committee. And thank you, all of you.